Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to this small but dedicated group for joining us today. Of course, this is a panel that I've actually personally been really looking forward to. These are three remarkable women, and they all bring unique perspectives to their work. But I think what's interesting you'll find is they have shared concerns around water management, around conservation, and protecting the environment, even though they come at it from such different angles. So today what we'd like to do is have a discussion where we draw on these different threads and explore some of the key issues. And then what we're going to do is ask you if you have any questions and you'd like to engage with them as well. So keep that in mind. But just to start off, perhaps what we can do is just do a round of introductions. If you'd like to just tell us a little bit about where you are right now in terms of your work and also what your experiences have been, just briefly. Anya, could we start with you? Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Hi, my name is Anya Ratnayake, and I am a wildlife conservationist. I work with fishing cats in urban wetlands, and what we do is we track them using GPS collars and try and understand how they utilize the urban environment.
Hi, I'm Kusum Athukorala. I work with different water organizations, and right now I'm concentrating on disaster risk reduction.
Hello everyone, I'm Chamila Weerathunge representing Environmental Foundation Limited. We have been operating in Sri Lanka since 1981 on advocating for environment, and we do public interest litigation among research and conservation projects. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to sort out these mics. You can keep this, Anya. So I think actually it might be interesting for us to start with getting to know each of them independently a little bit better. And maybe actually, Chamila, we could start with you. I know that your organization, EFL, did some work mapping the Kelani River last year. Could you talk to us a little bit about what that process was like, what the challenges were, and actually also why you began that in the first place?
Yeah, I would like to start with why it was necessary for us to put external inputs to the Kelani River. First thing is, Kelani River, we say it Kelani River basin, that provides 25% of habitats or settlements to the people of Sri Lanka. That is, 25% of people live around the Kelani River. That's a highly populated area. And to the Colombo district, it provides water. 80% of us in Colombo drink water purified from Kelani River. So that is just one example why we should take care of this particular river. But unfortunately, many literature, including Central Environmental Authority, has designated this particular river as the most polluted river in the country. So I think I don't have to justify it anymore. We need to do something for our own survival. It's not for like the animal or wildlife along in the peak wilderness where the river is passing through. It's for us. We need to do something. If we don't do something, in another 5 to 10 years, I don't know the situation, maybe Colombo will be an obsolete place to live. What we tried in doing is, first we wanted to identify the nature of the pollution of the river. So there are two aspects. One is the pollution. Other aspect is the quantity of the flow of the river. Whether we can get a consistent flow of the river throughout the year. Sometimes it floods like inundating area. Few kilometers of areas are getting inundated. And on the other hand, in certain months, you don't get water in the river, so the Colombo water supply is disrupted. That is one aspect. Other aspect is in terms of pollution, National Water Supply and Drainage Board has to incur a lot of cost in terms of purifying this water to be suitable as potable water. So we first started with the pollution component, that we wanted to identify sources of pollution. So we did pollution mapping. So far, we have completed about 60 kilometers along the river from the river mouth, and we are going upstream. And our work is sponsored by the Asia Foundation.
So Chamila, just to clarify, when you say sources of pollution, do you mean industrial sources? What exactly are these sources?
It's multiple. There are point source pollution. We say industrial discharges or discharges from hotels, restaurants. And then there is non-point source pollution, which is from agriculture, and then domestic pollution. When I say domestic pollution, you might not think that it is such a problem. But even the way you manage your waste contributes to the pollution. For an example, it's much more like detrimental than anything else. Sometimes we simply put our batteries or electronic items outside, and then certain heavy metals get sieved in, and it gets carried away to the river with the storm water. At the end of the day, river is polluted with heavy metals and the hazardous chemicals, and then it, after few days, it will go to the ocean, and our fish is fed by this ocean, and after few months, we will be consuming this food. So the cycle is simple as that.
So that actually fascinates me, this idea, one, that we are in much closer proximity to these sources of pollution than we realize, and also this idea of trying to juggle urban environments and the impact of the natural world there. And I'd like to draw you in, Anya, here to talk about like the wetlands, because one of the things Chamila touched on very briefly was flooding, and I know that the wetlands around Colombo are crucial to managing this issue. Could you talk a little bit about their value to us, but then also specifically in terms of your research, how the cats that you study are habitat specialists and what that means?
So wetlands are generally a habitat that's very overlooked by the public. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Sorry. Because normally when a person talks about a habitat, the rainforests are always highlighted, the grasslands are highlighted, places like Yala and Vilpattu are always highlighted, but not many people know the importance of a wetland. Especially in Colombo, they are a habitat that's very overlooked because they were generally an area where people would throw their garbage. So, I mean, wetlands are crucial because they act like sponges. They hold in a lot of water. And the best way I like to explain them when I talk to people is for example, if it hasn't rained for a very long time and you're watering your garden, and you start watering it, you see the water starts to run off the surface of the soil. Now, it takes a long time for the water to start seeping in, but if you water it a couple of times and the next day you go and the ground is still a bit damp, the water immediately gets absorbed into the ground. So that's basically what a wetland does. It's a wet habitat. The moment there's runoff, it seeps in and it acts like a sponge. So when we start clearing our wetlands, you're taking out that natural sponge and you've got flooding. And we see that in Colombo quite a lot. So I am trying to I'm trying to educate people about these habitats by using the fishing cat. Because if I run around saying let's protect a wetland because there are frogs or snakes, not many people like frogs and snakes. I mean, they're really awesome animals, but no one's really drawn to them. But if I go and say there's a fishing cat and it looks like a small leopard and they're these amazing looking animals, that's going to draw people in because they're a charismatic creature. So using the fishing cat, which is already an endangered species, I'm trying to promote wetland conservation.
I would actually love to, I know that you all have images, so please feel free to let me know when we should show them, but I would love to show that video right now.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's here. Tell me which one. Before we start, Anya, could you just tell us what we're about to see?
So I don't know if many of you all know what a fishing cat is, but it is one of the 33 species of small wildcat that we've got in the world. Sri Lanka has 3 species, but as usual, the small cats, like the wetlands, aren't talked about much. So this is the largest of the 3 we've got in the country. They're about the size of an adult Cocker Spaniel, and they get to about 16 kilos when they're adult males will get to about 16 kilos. So this particular cat has Sri Lankan origin. So she was taken as a zoo exchange program to the Aspinall Foundation in England. So basically she's just gonna come and say hi to everybody. They're an animal that quacks. They look like big, strong creatures that would maybe give out this roar that will send chills down your spine, but they actually quack like ducks, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of funny when you think about it. And that's another male implying her hello.
You said she was calling her babies?
Yeah, so there's a second part to this clip which I didn't bring, where her keeper goes and puts, so Calvin Klein obsession for men is also Calvin Klein obsession for small cats. They love that perfume. So what the keeper did was he sprayed a bit of that cologne on the ground just behind her, and in the second video she comes and she calls her kittens, and then they come and they start rolling in the scent. So that's another trick we use when we want to get cats on camera trap. We spray some really expensive perfume and then they come.
That's fabulous. I think we'll stop this here. So actually, when we were planning this discussion and I spoke to all the panelists, I was also really struck by how they all have such different backgrounds in a way that they're coming at the same issue from such different perspectives. And I think when I was listening to Kusum introduce herself, I thought, my God, so much humility here, because she has an incredible career, really. And I think with her, the fascination for me is in the connections between gender and, irrigation has been a long interest. But I wanted to just kind of talk to you in the context of what both Chamila and Anya have been mentioning, this idea of water management, this idea of responding to natural disasters. Could you give us a gender aspect on this? How is it different for women sometimes coming in?
Yeah, thank you, Smriti. I think I really need to start off by thanking Manika for organizing an event on advocacy. Advocacy is a kind of a sort of an intangible, which lots of people don't really engage with. But I think that this point in time in Sri Lanka, it is an extremely interesting time for advocacy. I would say it is the best of times, and it is also the worst of times. It is the best of times because we have policy changes such as the right to information, which is very useful for advocacy. It is the worst of times because we are planning to plant 100 acres of sugarcane in the Nilgala sanctuary, which is really one of the treasure houses of medicinal herbs. So if we look at advocacy, we have at different levels, and every one of these has a kind of a gender dimension or a would-be gender dimension. At the highest level, we have the national level advocacy, such as we have seen very successfully in the polythene ban. Now, this affects men and women equally, and I'm not a medical person to talk about, the enhanced impacts on either gender. Then we have other cases, such as where civil society engages with communities and also supports communities, and takes on issues such as Chamila has been working with, in Kalaniganga, but also in Wilpattu. Then we have the lower level of advocacy, which is the community which is being facing problems due to maybe what we call development, which could be a mini hydro, which could be agricultural wells, could be groundwater use of, we would say, overuse of groundwater. And this is where we see people getting onto the road with boards. And you would notice that quite a few of them are women. And quite a few of these activities which engender this kind of activism is also related to climate change, because climate change is that big elephant in the room that we all have to contend with. Now, because of this, we have a lot of women's engagement, but this engagement never really brings them upstream, in the same way that we don't have political women going too much upstream. We have very few getting engaged. But if you take a disaster, disasters impact on women in different ways. Let me look at two, floods and landslides. And then maybe especially I would like to concentrate on landslides, where women are displaced if they are unfortunate enough to be in the path of a landslide. They could be dead. Now, when they are displaced, there is all these problems of living in a camp. I really don't see why we need to put people in camps. There must be some other solution, because it's so traumatic for families. One is being displaced, but other one is, that you are in this position where you fast develop a dependency syndrome, even though you have been coming from a very, I would say, a self-sufficient background. The other one that could happen, and I don't have data on this, is that you could, when all your livelihoods are lost, there is only one left, and that is prostitution. That could happen. And the third issue which would happen is that, people who never wanted to go to the Middle East will end up going to the Middle East. So big disasters have big impacts. When we take the Ratnayake landslide, or all the landslides which happened, last year along with Ratnayake, we count the cost in numbers. We have lost X billion rupees. But do we count the loss for a family or a community? We still can't put a number on that. So that is where I think that we have a fair amount of time to go. But I would like you to put up that little slide from the woman who wrote to me. I was doing a program in Ratnayake for 200 families who we think are going to be endangered if another extreme event happens, if another landslide happens. Because in Ratnayake, we have people who are called high risk and medium risk. High risk people have been already removed from this area. But the medium risk people, as you can see, are fast becoming high risk, because we are not allowing we are not taking the safeguards which have to go into disaster risk reduction. Let me give you some numbers. Maoya starts up in Ratnayake. Well, actually it starts in Central Province, but Ratnayake is the kind of the base in it. Ratnayake, Mavanella, Rambukkana. Let me give you the numbers of jack trees cut with legally with permits. 1,800 in Ratnayake, 1,700 in Mavanella, 700 in Rambukkana. Let me also tell you that I believe there was a gazette allowing use of mobile sawmills. We have now, as of 2 months ago, 20 mobile sawmills operating in Ratnayake, 17 in Mavanella, and I think about 6 in Rambukkana. So, why does a landslide happen? Let's maybe talk about it later, because I'd like to show you some visuals. But as this lady very rightly pointed out, she is a medium risk person who is going to become high risk. She is going to get displaced. This country is going to spend a lot of money dealing with what we should deal with now. disaster risk reduction and not disaster prevention, but not disaster management. By the way, we are very good at disaster management. We all, Sri Lankans are enormously generous. We go and do things, but then, is this what we should be doing?
So I'd like to come back to that and build on it a little more in a moment. But at this point, Chamila, I'd like to invite you also to jump in, because we did talk about the need to preserve catchment areas and the kind of impact we're seeing deforestation have literally downstream. Would you be willing to talk to us a bit about that?
Yes, this is again, I would like to start in terms of urban resilience. What is our resilience as a city, Colombo? Without water, how long can you survive? So that is the question we should be asking, because Kalani River provides water for us. So if we don't preserve the catchment or the water generating areas of the river, we won't have water. So we have to face this inconvenient truth, the way, if we continue the way we have been doing it. Like in the catchment area, more than 50% is now under either plantations or settlements, different land uses. But what's the big deal? A general person would ask. So I will have to take you through a bit of hydrology. That is, without forest cover, you will end up with, like, when the rain falls, forest cover slows down the runoff or the precipitation, and it forest cover supports that water to be absorbed to the soil without making much of a runoff. There are two aspects. If the forest cover is not there, you will end up with a lot of runoff in the event of a precipitation, which will result in floods and landslides. But if there is forest cover, the soil will absorb a lot of water through infiltration, and later on it will enrich or replenish the groundwater, which will be facilitating a constant flow of the river. That water we are using in Colombo for our drinking water or other uses like industrial water, or you name it, we want water for each and everything. So if the forest cover is getting cleared within the rainfall of 1 or 2 days, we will end up in getting floods. And after maybe run of say 10 to 15 years, the soil will not have the capacity to absorb water, so that the river, the perennial river, now it flows throughout the year. It will end up being seasonal. When the rainfall is there will be water in the river, and when there is a period of say 2 weeks, 1 month of drought period where we don't get water, rainfall, the river will go dry. So where should we draw water for our drinking purposes or anything else? So that is the truth.
Thank you, that's so interesting. I just want to pull Anya in on this as well in terms of urban resilience. And what do you see as the major threats to the wetlands? In a sense, is there an issue with, I think Kusum is also going to come back and talk about untrammeled development and the problems of that. But when you see communities occupying the wetlands, what do you think, even in protected spaces, are there issues?
There's a lot of encroachment that happens with wetlands because they are habitats that show no importance to people. Lots of people clear them and have, they either build on it or they have like home gardens in it, which, as Chamila says, when you take out that natural vegetation and plant other things like, I don't know, vegetables, that's not going to really help with absorbing that water, because the natural vegetation has a root system which is, adapted to that particular habitat, and so it absorbs the water better, it keeps the habitat and the soil, the nutrients, it makes sure that it's a healthy ecosystem. So when you clear out a habitat for, construction or development, or even just, to make your garden a little bigger, you're really affecting that ecosystem. And yeah, and then you end up getting a really messed up wetland, which is really bad for the wildlife that you have in it. So yeah.
I'll come back to you on the wildlife. But Kusum, when we were talking earlier, what also struck me was you were talking about the sum total of many individual actions. You were talking about people pulling out drains and dismantling structures that needed to be in place. Would you talk about how that can lead to a disaster like a landslide?
Yeah, actually, if I'm to go back to the Maoya upper catchment, the Maoya upper catchment, it's hardly anybody knows very much about it. Hardly, I don't know how many people would have gone to Ratnayake, but then Ratnayake and Maoya feeds about 3 million people, all the way down to Pallansena in Negombo. Now, after the Maoya landslide, this was the driest we had ever seen Maoya. The levels really went dry. The upper catchment areas went so dry that we went to schools which were going to close up because they simply couldn't cope. So in fact, with the support of the Hatton National Bank, we gave 10 rainwater harvesting systems to 10 of the worst affected schools, not the big ones, the small ones, the marginalized ones, the ones where the children can't afford to go to the big schools. Now, that was one issue that we saw. The second is that there was this big threat between, which was perceived by the medium risk community. But then, if we have another landslide in Ratnayake, there's no more place to build houses. There's absolutely no houses. In fact, I'm wondering how Ratnayake is going to cope, because for the first time they are going to have 2-story houses. So you will have to get used to living in that close proximity. It's not easy because people have been using to live in quite a separate way. The second one is that this area has good tea, but right now what is happening is that tea cultivation is happening without the proper land conservation and soil conservation measures. I can show you some of those pictures. And the third issue is that this illicit logging, which is, if you sit on that road for maybe 5 hours, you will see lorry after lorry of illicit, I don't know whether it is licit or illicit, but there'll be logs being transported. So then when you come down, again, we need to, as I said, join up the dots. Maoya also is feeding Pinnavala. Pinnavala is like the jewel in the crown, or I would say one of the jewels in the crown for Sri Lankan tourism. So, as the Honorable Minister of Sustainable Development and Wildlife is a great, I would say, a supporter of environment conservation, but then I do think that if we do not look after the catchment, you will have a problem for the Pinnavala elephants. I don't see them, getting water bowsers for Pinnavala. The second one is the jack trees, which are important for animals, for elephants. We are having a massive amount of jack trees being felled. So at some point, unless we link the dots, we are going to have problems. Let's not go downstream, because I think there are about 37 water board intakes. There are factories such as Mass Holdings in Tulhiria. So this entire thing starts by looking after the Maoya catchment. The Maoya catchment, some of it has very good, I would say, old tea estates, but people are poor. They are now taking off all those drainage paths and drainage stones and making fences. Now, I am not sure whose job it is to look at it. I think it is a collective job. I don't think it is a job only for the Forest Department or the CEA or the Divisional Secretary, who is hard-pressed as he is. But in advocacy, there's a role for everybody. In fact, there's even a role for people whom we think are not really in the environment issue. There's a role for bankers and insurance people as well as others. So basically, we need to have what I would call an integrated development perspective. We call it an integrated water resource management perspective, because we have to look at, again, there's another issue which happens. We cut down the catchments. The monkeys invade the home gardens. The home gardens do not produce anything for people. And then what do? Either you noose the wild boar and you shoot the monkeys or electrocute the monkeys, which is what is happening. So there is a whole lot of issues which are happening, but since we refuse to look at the big picture, we are looking in this very holistic, not in the holistic manner, but we are thinking in silos. We are, looking in this bifurcated administrative system. We are not getting the solution that we can. I don't think that this is a situation where, things are so bad that nothing can be done. I think things are pretty good if we can sit down and plan together.
So that actually is a fascinating thing that I've heard from both inside and outside the government, this issue of collaboration between various ministries. Chamila, I'm curious, could you also respond to what Kusum just said? How do you see this playing out in the field?
Yeah, so we have been working both in the Mahaoya and the Kalani River and mini hydro. So Kusum, I and Anya will have a lot of common areas to work with, and all of us have been working together. So let me explain this context in relation to the Kalani River. So as Kusum said, there are a lot of water intakes along the Mahaoya, and in terms of economic value, the river is generating to the country is enormous. But in the case of Kalani River, without the river, I don't think this city Colombo can survive. So the problem is that deep. So because along the river, there are about 5 to 6 industrial zones, including the Biyagama export processing zone, which generates about, say, nearly 5% of the economic value to the country. And then there is Sitawaka industrial zone, and within the basin area, there are more than 10,000 commercial and industrial establishments. They take water and then they discharge their wastewater, treated or untreated, to the river. So sometimes the river has the capacity to assimilate some of these pollution, sometimes it doesn't. And as I said before, there are 25% of Sri Lankan population. Think about, say, 5 to 6 million people live in the catchment. All their waste and wastewater will, at one way or the other, direct or indirectly, end up in the river. And agriculture pollution. So all these things will finally end up in the river. So we need to take it that serious. You need to take care of the river, catchment, and its ecosystems. Because as Kusum said, catchment conservation is extremely important. And catchment is not only limited to the headwaters or what we say the mountainous areas. It's extremely important to conserve those areas, but along the river also you need to take care of the associated ecosystems. If I tell you one example that may very relevant to you, in the Kitulgara area there are so many restaurants and whitewater rafting facilitating commercial establishment. But to my knowledge, none of these have proper wastewater treatment facility. So whenever we go there, we spend 1 or 2 days there and we use toilets. So their sewage line is directly connected to the river. In the area, we got a complaint that people who have been playing the water, people who have been using the river for bathing, have come across a lot of skin diseases. Then we started looking into what the reason would be, and finally ended up with the reason, the fact that the river has a lot of fecal matter. It's highly fecally polluted. And the numbers of the E. coli, some of you may know what the E. coli is. If there is E. coli, that is fecally contaminated. It has a concentration of 400 ppm. That means it's highly polluted. It's like the sewage is somewhat diluted like in the river. So this is the water that we are using in the downstream for drinking and all the other purposes. So that's why we need to look at this problem in a very serious and more responsible way. So it's maybe the case of Mahavaya, Kalani River, and those are the things we work on. It can be common to Mahavali, Ganga, or anywhere. So we need to take this serious. It is not for the environment or wildlife, it is for our survival.
I'd also like to build on the idea of sustainable tourism and the implications of this kind of issues around water. But before that, I just want to get Anya's take also on this idea of, I understand when it comes to conservation, in particular, you have the Department of Wildlife Conservation, and then you have the Department of Forestry. And when there are issues, for instance, with human-elephant conflict, both those departments are sometimes doing completely different things. So do you find yourself having to deal with that in a way, this idea of people operating in silos?
Yeah, they're really... I was talking to my husband yesterday about this. I don't know, for some reason, sorry. I like to joke about the fact that especially in wildlife conservation in Sri Lanka, people are very territorial. People are like your big, like all these conservation groups are like the big male tiger going and peeing on a tree or scratching the bark and saying, this is my territory, you do not come here. And if anybody does come, then you're in trouble. So, and it's really sad because I guess like when the senior conservationists were my age, being territorial about your work, I understand, because you had the luxury of being territorial. You could be the first person to GPS track a fishing cat and get the home range for the first time. That's fine, be territorial about that. But we're living in an age where you can't do that anymore, because in order to conserve a species, you have to work together. There's no point me working on fishing cats in Colombo and my colleague in Kandy and none of us communicating about the work that we do, or talking to people like Chamila and Kusum about the work that we do. Because in order to conserve everything, we need to work together. And it's really sad that not just government departments and government bodies, but even just young conservationists and older conservationists, some of them are just so reluctant to work together because they just don't want to share their information, which makes no sense, because at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same goal. So I really don't understand why they do it, but it's really frustrating because I'm a person who's like, if I want to save my fishing cats, but I can't save my fishing cats without working with people like Chamila and Kusum who are working on water and making sure that the Mahavali and all these rivers are protected. There's no point. So it's really frustrating when you hit a brick wall, especially with government departments. Sometimes they're so adamant that you don't do this because it has never been done before. And you're like, it's frustrating sometimes, but you have to learn to work around it and try and, talk to them in a way that they understand it, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, they change their minds and they work with you. But it definitely is a problem when you don't get collaboration. It's difficult to do what you're doing, so.
Can I add something?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, we have this about, say, 10 to 15 years experience in working with different government departments. So if I say that the wildlife department doesn't know what does the forest department do. So the situation is that bad. They are managing the same ecosystem, and there are these administrative boundaries. This is wildlife area, this is forest area, this is Central Environmental Authorities area. None of them communicate with each other. So it's just a job for them, and there is no common platform. There are committees, but one doesn't like the view of the other. It's just that as Anya said, it's sometimes territorial, most of the time it's territorial, and most of the time they take it as 8 to 5 job. But with the environment, you can't do that. So you can't be like, okay, this is my TOR. So this thing is to look at this document. If it is okay, just go ahead. It can't be like this. You have to work together for a common objective. Otherwise, we will be ending up with every year having floods or droughts. Like when we have floods in 7 districts, in another 13 districts, there will be drought. So every year we will experience this.
We're coming up on our last 15 minutes, and I realize when I look at this session that we've talked a lot about what the challenges have been. Yes, of course.
Actually, because I'm part of the Global Water Partnership and I'm at the Sri Lanka Water Partnership, we have partners from every group. We have civil society, we have government, we have academia, and then of course we have community. So I think that, what we have been trying to do is that, and a lot of the work that I'm trying to do right now is to try and work together. Now in Ratnayake, we have to work with the divisional secretary, the NBRO, the Met department, the water board, the forest department, Shakti, tea smallholders. So I think that part of what we need to do with advocacy is also give people an idea or give them a platform where they can come together without losing too much face, without losing too much of overstepping their administrative boundaries, because we know that government servants have certain boundaries which they cannot overstep. In civil society, we have a little more liberty. So I think that partly our work, before we get to doing the real work, is to build these platforms of cooperation. And this is something that advocacy has to look at.
I love that because you actually answered my question just before I could ask it. So the idea was that our conversation has highlighted what the challenges have been. We've talked about how in some ways we're actually in the middle of a crisis where the next natural disaster might hit at any moment and we're not prepared. There is also an ongoing kind of devastation of our ecosystems. I want to ask you for the takeaways for you. What would you like to see going forward? What do you think needs to change for us to actually make a difference right now in this point of time?
So what we should do is, first thing, as everyone else said, is the collaboration. Single-handedly, we can't do this. It can't be scattered decision-making process. Everyone should get together, and one thing is increasing our resilience for all these disasters. But before that, we need to work preemptively or prevent whatever that may occur. So we are working in the era, living in the era of changing climate, and impacts are always hitting us every year. So it will affect our subsistence as well as the economy of the country. So for example, as Kusum said, Pinnawala there is tourism, Kitulgala there is tourism. So a lot of these in Colombo, urban wetlands are a good place for ecotourism. So we need to, there are different government departments which have to come together to work on this common objective. So it can be our survival, it can be generating economic value, it can be the survival of wildlife. There are about, say, 20 to 30 stakeholders, government stakeholders, civil society. Everyone should come together and working towards a common goal. And now there is some sort of hope that there is a sustainability platform which is mainstreaming sustainability into other departments' decision making. So they have identified 480 government institutions that the sustainability component should be embedded into their decision making process. So we need to support and advocate for that particular process, because sustainability is something one department or one or two departments can advocate for. It has to be in the mainstream of all the decision making processes. That is one thing we should try to give much more priority and prominence. The other thing is, as people, individuals, I didn't talk much about our waste management and things, but as an individual, we need to take care of our footprint on this earth. We can't let, say, CEA or Central Environmental Authority or the Urban Development Authority or the particular local council to take care of what we generate as waste. And the way we pollute the air, the way we pollute the water. We need to be highly conscious as citizens, and we need to be responsible as citizens to take care of the impact we would be making on this planet. That's the message I have.
Thank you, Chamila. Anya, would you also like to add something?
I think the main thing, as Chamila said, collaboration is a big part of it, but also just general awareness. So the species and the habitats I work with and in, not many people know about it. So if I usually ask the crowd, can you name me the 5 big cats, everyone can shoot them out. But if I say, can you name me 5 small cats, people usually just say house cat. And if I'm wearing my project t-shirt, they say the cat on your t-shirt. So, I mean, there are 33 small cats. I didn't know that until I left university, so that's how bad it is. But, I mean, there needs to be awareness for all the little things. Not everything is about a rainforest. I mean, yeah, it is about a rainforest, but there are other habitat. Oh my God, that came up wrong. But not everything is about the leopard and the blue whale and the elephant in this country. There is a really amazing blue snail in I don't know. Is it Singharaja? No, the mist, the cloud, the mist.
The cloud forest up in...
Yeah. Haggala. So there is a really tiny population of this bright, I mean, it's like a luminous blue snail with a black shell. I mean, how amazing is that? So nobody knows about that. But if I go and say, like, shall we do a field trip and go and see those animals, they'll be like, I'm busy, I have this, I have that. But if I say, let's go to Yala, they'll be like, yes, leopard. So people need to start talking about the lesser known species, the lesser known habitats, and start, paying attention to those. Because if you lose those, you're going to end up losing the bigger animals as well. Because everything is connected at the end of the day. So when you lose the animals, you lose the habitat, you've lost us. So yeah, you just need to be a little more conscious of that. So I want people to start paying attention to the smaller things.
Thank you so much. So on that note, I think we'll throw this open to the audience.